Hello humans, Master DinnerFlax here, and I am going to have a quick-ish for me, discussion on the difference between, kind of the ups and downs of a Tier 0 format. And I want to get into it straight away, otherwise I'm going to distract myself by looking at these random cards and looking very confused. Alright, so one of the things about the Tier 0 formats that allure people is that one of the things is that they promote a very skilled part of the game. I'll just go over pros right now. So the pros are the format is completely defined. So when you know what you're going to play and you know what you're going to play against, and there's going to be very little variation of that, and it allows you to build your deck correctly without much change except specific text of the format. So your deck doesn't keep changing and don't have to keep buying cards for every 5-second shift in the meta that will happen in a format that's not tier 0. Second, between tier 0 decks are probably some of the most skilled interactions in all of Yu-Gi-Oh! So there's a reason why Goat Control and Teledad are the most played iconic old school decks, because they were those decks, there were only those interactions, and it got to show who was the better player and who had the better line of play. And I actually agree with that. I think when you're looking at it that way, there's so much less variance in the game when there's only one deck. Not to mention your card interactions, your card choices can show what and how you interact with your cards can show you how different of a player you are from your opponent and how much better you can be. Even in a game where you lose, you will you will end that game knowing who is the better player. Now, it's time for the cons. I do want to make this video very quick because I didn't even want to make a video today, but it's like whatever. One of the major like downsides of a tier 0 format is that the longer they are, the massive decline in players happen. So the only time where this was an exception was in Dragon Ruler format, and the only reason it was an exception in Dragon Ruler format was because it came so quick, and there were decks to and there were ways to counter it, unlike other tier 0 formats. It came by so quick, and then it became way more fair with Ravine Rulers. Now, when you're looking at Teledad, a tier 0 format that lasted for years, it probably had the sharpest decline in the player base of all time. And that's like really, really bad. Um, Tier 0 formats, not only do they have players leave over time just from pure frustration, but it's also the type of formats that don't introduce new players. Because if they see a game and they're completely discouraged because the only thing that really allows them to do well has a price tag that's way above what they were wanting to, then they're not really going to want to get in the game, and they can't really learn how to play the game in a tier 0 format because they're not given a back and forth interaction of Yu-Gi-Oh! They're literally just losing to this deck, and they will have no ability to learn why just because of its pace. So that's one thing. Another thing is the game just gets boring. After like 2 months, the game becomes so unbelievably stale that it doesn't matter how much you love tier 0 formats and how much you want to do well at this game, you will find yourself extremely bored with the format. So those are some really the first one was really rough because the game can only survive based on the player base. And yes, while the competitive community does do a lot of heavy lifting when it comes to money, it is really, really crucial that they have a massive amount of casual players, introduct introductory players, and reintroductory players for all those profits. And Tier 0 formats lock them completely out. And another thing about Tier 0 formats is they're not very profitable at the end of the day because the sets that are doing them well are sets that have already been printed, and the only way to exploit it more is to keep feeding the Tier 0 deck, which is really bad. And a perfect example is like Zoo. That's pretty rough. But that's about it. Thank you all for watching. I'm going to give a short summary. Tier 0 formats are actually very good for the game and somewhat small doses. I've already talked about this before to some people. But if you were to take a ratio of all the years of Yu-Gi-Oh, I think the perfect number of Tier 0 formats in months per year is about 2 or 3. In an entire year, 2 or 3 months need to be devoted to a Tier 0 format because it's probably the best for players that are improving their skill and players that are already very skilled to enjoy the game in a way that they can't normally. Um, but at the same time, it's not a good idea to sustain the game on this because it's really bad for literally every other reason. Um, but it does need to exist, and it makes the game very memorable for all the card interactions. Also, I might later on do a video on the pros and cons of multi-deck formats. I'm talking about like Hat, where it's just 100 million different decks. But yeah, that's gonna be it. Thank you all for watching, and remember, Master DinnerFlax will take your soul.